I felt like there was something strange going on in my house, so I faked a trip to visit my sister. While I was watching the situation from across the street, an elderly neighbor suddenly approached and tapped my shoulder, saying, "Wait until midnight, you'll discover everything." When the clock struck midnight, my breath stopped at what I saw, but let me explain how I got to that point. As a 64-year-old woman, I ended up hiding in my neighbor's house, spying on my own home as if I were a criminal, because what I discovered that night not only destroyed my trust in my family, but it showed me just how far the people you love can go when greed takes control of their hearts. My name is Evelina. This house where I've lived for the last 40 years is my sanctuary, my history, my entire life, built with effort alongside my late husband. Every corner here holds our memories. The kitchen where we prepared Sunday morning breakfast, the living room where we watched our son Robert grow up, the garden we cultivated with our own hands. When my husband died 7 years ago, Robert insisted on moving here with his wife, Audrey. "So, you won't be alone, Mom," he told me. At the time, I thought it was filial love. How naive I was. The first few months were quiet, almost happy. We ate dinner together, talked, and laughed. Audrey was attentive, even affectionate. She helped me with the grocery shopping, cooked my favorite meals like a good pot roast or mashed potatoes. Robert fixed things around the house that broke down. I thought, what a blessing to have my family close in my old age. But about 4 months ago, something changed. It was as if someone had flipped an invisible switch. The smiles became mechanical, the conversations forced, and the whispers began. At first, I thought it was my imagination, that my age was playing tricks on me, but the whispers were real. Every time I entered a room, they would abruptly stop talking. Robert would quickly put away his phone with a swift, almost guilty motion. Audrey would change the subject with a tense smile. "What were you talking about?" I would ask them. "Nothing important," Audrey replied with that sweet voice that was starting to sound hollow to me. "Word stuff, Mom," Robert would add without looking me in the eye. Then I noticed other details. The door to my old master bedroom, the one I had converted into storage after my husband's death, was always locked now. Before it remained open. "Why do you lock that room?" I asked one day. Audrey responded too quickly. "It's just that there's a moisture problem. We don't want your things to get damaged." But I didn't remember giving permission for them to touch that room. I didn't remember talking about moisture, and when I walked down the hall at night, I heard strange noises coming from there. Footsteps, muffled voices, laughs that weren't my son's or my daughter-in-law's. One night close to 11, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. I got out of bed and walked carefully to the hallway, making sure not to make a sound. From my bedroom, I could see the entrance. I saw Audrey receiving a young woman with a small suitcase. They spoke in a low voice. The woman handed something over, cash maybe, and Audrey quickly tucked it into her pants pocket. Then she guided her down the hall precisely toward that room that supposedly had a moisture issue. I heard the sound of the key turning. The door opened, yellow light spilled out and then it closed again. The next morning during breakfast, I didn't mention anything. I only observed Audrey prepared coffee with that perfect smile that no longer fooled me. Robert was reading the news on his phone, distracted. "Did you sleep well?" I asked casually. "Very well, Mom," Robert replied without looking up. "Like babies," Audrey added. Liars. Both of them were liars. But I needed proof. I needed to know exactly what was happening in my own home before I confronted them. That same afternoon, while Audrey was out at the grocery store and Robert was at his job, I tried to open the room's door. I had my own set of keys. Of course, it was my house. But when I tried to use my master key, I discovered they had changed the lock. They changed the lock on a room in my own house without telling me anything. My heart pounded hard. The rage began to boil in my chest. Who did they think they were? This was my property, my home. Every inch of this house belonged to me legally. But rage solves nothing. Rage only clouds judgment. So I took a deep breath and thought clearly. If they were hiding something, I needed to discover it without them suspecting that. I knew I needed a plan, and then it occurred to me, I would fake a trip. I would tell them I was visiting my sister in another city, like maybe Boston. I would leave them alone, and I would watch from afar what they did when they thought I wasn't around. That's when I talked to Moses, my lifelong neighbor. He lives right across the street from my house. From his window, he has a direct view of my front entrance. I told him my suspicions, and what he told me chilled my blood. Elenina, I've noticed strange things, too, Moses told me in a low voice while pouring me some iced tea in his kitchen. Moses is 72 years old. He's a widower like me, and we've been neighbors since my husband and I built this house. He knows every corner of my life, every joy, and every sorrow. For weeks, I've wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know if I should get involved. I didn't want to worry you without being sure. His hand trembled slightly as he held the cup. What have you seen, Moses? I asked him, feeling fear settle in my stomach like a cold stone. He said, deeply before answering, I've seen people coming and going from your house at odd hours, always at night, always, with suitcases or backpacks. Sometimes they are young women, sometimes couples, never the same people. They arrive in taxis in private cars. Audrey receives them at the door. They talk briefly and then they go inside. The next day, early in the morning, they leave. Everything is very fast, very discreet, as if they are doing something they don't want anyone to see. His words confirmed my worst suspicions. I wasn't crazy. It wasn't my imagination. Something really was happening in my house. Something that involved strangers, money, and secrets. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked him, feeling a mixture of relief and anguish. Because I hoped I was wrong, Moses replied. Because I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. Maybe friends of Robert's, I thought. Maybe family of Audrey's who needed temporary lodging. But when I saw Audrey receiving cash at the door last week, I knew this was a business. And a business done in secret is never an honest business. He leaned forward and lowered his voice, as if someone could hear us. Elenina, I think they are using your house for something. I don't know exactly what, but it's something they don't want you to know. That's why they wait for you to be asleep. That's why they act normal during the day. I then told him my plan. I told him I would fake the trip, that I would make them believe I would be gone for a whole week, and that I needed his help to watch my house from his window. Moses immediately accepted. You can stay here in the guest room, Cha, he offered in, and from the upstairs window, you can see your entrance and part of your living room perfectly. We'll see everything they do. I felt immense relief. I wasn't alone in this. I had an ally, a witness, someone who could confirm what my eyes saw, so they couldn't later say that I was confused or senile. That same night, I returned to my house and began the performance. During dinner, I casually announced, tomorrow, I'm traveling to visit my sister for a week. I haven't seen her in months, and she's been insisting a lot. The reaction was immediate. Robert looked up from his plate with bright eyes. Audrey stopped chewing for a second and then smiled. A smile that was too wide, too enthusiastic. That's great. It will do you good to get out a bit, to change the scenery, right, Robert? My son nodded vigorously. Yes, Mom, you deserve a break. We'll take care of the house. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. Those words resonated in my head with a sinister echo. The way they said it, with that barely concealed relief, with that urgency to see me leave, I continued with my act. I need you to water the plants in the garden every other day, and please keep the house tidy. You know, I don't like clutter. Audrey nodded with exaggerated enthusiasm. Of course, everything will be perfect when you return. Enjoy your trip. Perfect. They wanted me to leave. They needed me to leave. That only confirmed they were hiding something big. The next morning, I did the whole show. I took out my old suitcase, the one my husband and I used when we traveled. I filled it with clothes, toiletries, all in their set. I called my sister loudly on the phone from the living room so they would hear. Yes, sis, I'm heading out there now. I'll get there before lunch. Of course, my sister knew about the plan. I had told her everything. She was worried, too, and supported me completely. Robert insisted on driving me to the bus station. That's not necessary, son. I can take a cab, but he insisted. He wanted to make sure I was really leaving. At the terminal, he walked me to the platform. He hugged me and said, "Have a good trip, Mom. Call us when you arrive so we know you're okay." I looked him in the eyes, those eyes I had known since he was a baby, and searched for any trace of guilt, of remorse, but I only saw impatience. He wanted me to get on that bus. He wanted to see me leave. "I'll call you, son," I told him, and entered the terminal, but I didn't get on any bus. I waited 20 minutes, enough time for Robert to leave. Then I left through another door, took a cab, and gave the driver Moses' address. When I arrived at my neighbor's house, he already had everything prepared. He showed me the guest room on the second floor. From the window, my house was fully visible. The front entrance, the small front yard, part of the living room through the curtains. "Now all we have to do is wait," Moses said, "and observe." I sat by the window with a knot in my stomach. My own house, the place where I had been happy for decades, now felt like enemy territory, a place I needed to spy on from afar, to discover what the people I had loved and protected were doing. The first few hours were normal. Audrey went out to the grocery store around 10 o'clock in the morning. Robert left for work as always. The house was left alone, silent, but when evening fell around 6 o'clock, I saw something that made me hold my breath. A silver car parked in front of my house. A young couple got out, maybe in their 30s. They were carrying a large suitcase and 2 backpacks. Audrey opened the door before they could ring the doorbell as if she were expecting them. She greeted them with smiles. They spoke briefly. The man took out his wallet and handed cash to Audrey. She quickly counted it and invited them in. I felt the floor disappear beneath my feet. I had just seen my daughter-in-law receive money from strangers and let them into my house as if it were a hotel. Moses was standing next to me watching the same scene, his face tense. "Did you see that?" I asked him with a trembling voice, needing confirmation that my eyes weren't deceiving me. "I saw it, Alalena. I saw everything," he replied grimly. "These aren't just suspicions anymore. It's real. They are using your house to rent rooms without you knowing. Renting rooms in my house, the house I built with my late husband with years of work and sacrifice, the house where I raised my son, the house full of sacred memories, and they were turning it into a clandestine business behind my back." The rage I felt at that moment was like liquid fire running through my veins. I wanted to cross the street, knock on the door, and confront them in front of those strangers, but Moses put his hand on my shoulder firmly. "Wait, Alalena. If you go now, we'll only know this, but if we wait, if we watch more, we will discover the whole truth, the complete magnitude of what they are doing." He was right. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the hurricane raging inside my chest. I sat down again by the window, my hands clenched in my lap. Over the next hour, I saw lights turning on in different rooms of my house, the living room, the kitchen, and then I saw light coming from that room, my old master bedroom, the one that supposedly had a moisture problem, the one they kept locked up. Now I understood why. There was no moisture. There were guests, strange people sleeping in the space where my husband and I had shared 35 years of marriage. Unknown people using the bed where he died in my arms. Unknown people walking on the floor where I had cried over his death for months. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Without permission, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of fury, of betrayal, of a pain so deep that I felt like I would break in two. How could they? I whispered to myself. How could my own son do this to me? Moses didn't say anything. He just sat beside me in silence, respecting my pain. Outside, the night continued to fall at my house. My home was transforming into something unrecognizable before my eyes. Around 9 o'clock that night, Robert arrived from work. I saw him park his car, enter the house with his briefcase as if it were a normal day, as if he wasn't participating in a monumental betrayal against his own mother. 20 minutes later, another couple arrived, younger this time, maybe 25 years old. Audrey received them with the same routine. Cash, smiles, doors opening. and they entered carrying their suitcases as if they were arriving at any roadside motel. I counted mentally. There were already 2 couples inside my house. 4 strangers occupying my spaces, breathing my air, touching my things. How long do you think they've been doing this? I asked Moses. He thought for a moment before answering. From what I've observed, I would say at least 3 months, maybe 4. It started, little by little. At first, it was 1 person every week, then 2. Now I see movement almost every day, 3 or 4 months. All this time while I lived under the same roof, they were operating this secret business. Every time I went to sleep early, every time I went out to run errands, every time I visited a friend, they took advantage to receive more people, to make more money with my property. I calculated mentally, if each couple paid, say $50 per night and they had 2 or 3 couples every night, they were making between $100 and $150 daily. In 1 month, that added up to over $3,000. In 4 months, over $12,000 $12,000 earned illegally using my house, my electricity, my water, my gas, without paying me a single cent, without even having the decency to ask me if they could do it. They stole from me. My own son and daughter-in-law were stealing from me in the most vile and calculated way. The night deepened. Around 11, the lights in my house began to turn off one by one. First the living room, then the kitchen. The bedrooms remained lit for a little longer, and then they too went dark. Everything fell silent. I remained sitting by the window, unable to move, unable to fully process the dimension of what I had discovered. Moses brought me a blanket and hot tea. You should rest, Elena. Tomorrow, there will be more to see. But I couldn't rest. I couldn't close my eyes, knowing that strangers were sleeping in my house. I stayed there all night, watching, and my vigil was rewarded. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the door to my house opened. The young couple who had arrived first came out with their suitcases. A taxi was waiting for them. They left quickly, discreetly, like ghosts, disappearing with the light out. Half an hour later, the second couple did the same. By 7 o'clock in the morning, all the guests were gone. Audrey went out to the front yard with a trash bag, left it in the container, and went back inside. Everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened, as if my house hadn't been violated all night long. Robert left the house at 8, ready to go to work. He wore his gray suit, carried his briefcase, walked with that straight posture I had taught him since he was a child. He looked like a respectable, hard-working, honest man. But I knew the truth now. I knew that behind that facade of a responsible son hid a man capable of betraying his own mother for money. A man who could look me in the eye during breakfast after having filled my house with strangers all night. During the day, I watched Audrey moving around the house. I saw her changing sheets, cleaning rooms, preparing everything for the next guests. She worked efficiently with practice. This wasn't something new for her. She had an established routine. Every move was calculated, professional. She was the brains of this operation. I was sure Robert may have agreed. Maybe he collaborated, but Audrey was the one running everything. I could see it in the way she managed the business, in how she organized every detail. When evening fell on the second day, more guests arrived. This time it was 3 people, 2 men and a woman. They seemed to be friends traveling together. Audrey received them the same way as the previous ones, cash in hand, professional smiles, doors opening, and I kept watching from Moses' window, mentally documenting every movement, every transaction, every betrayal. Moses had suggested taking pictures, but I didn't want digital evidence yet. First, I needed to understand the complete operation. I needed to know if there was something else, something worse that I hadn't discovered yet. And then Moses told me something that changed everything. It was the night of the second day, close to 10, when he approached me with a serious expression. Elena, there's something else you need to know, something I've been hesitant to tell you or not. My heart sped up. What is it, Moses? He sat across from me, his elderly eyes full of worry. 2 weeks ago, I saw Audrey meeting a man at the corner coffee shop. It wasn't Robert. It was someone older, well-dressed, with a lawyer or doctor's briefcase. They talked for almost an hour. I was at the next table, and even though I didn't want to listen, some words reached my ears. I leaned forward, every muscle in my body tense. What words? Moses, he swallowed before continuing. I heard something about documents, about mental competency, about medical evaluations, and about nursing homes. The world stopped. Those words fell on me like blocks of ice. Mental competency, medical evaluations, nursing homes. No, they couldn't be planning that. Are you sure about what you heard? I asked. In a barely audible voice, Moses nodded slowly. Wait until Friday midnight. Elenina, I've noticed that Fridays are special. There's more movement, more people, more activity. Wait until Friday midnight. You discover everything. Moses' words resonated in my head like funeral bells. Mental competency, medical evaluations, nursing homes. It couldn't be a coincidence. Not after discovering they were using my house as a clandestine business. This was bigger, darker, more calculated than I had imagined. They weren't just stealing from me. They were preparing me for something worse. Something that would take away not just my house, but my freedom, my dignity, my entire life. I spent the next 3 days in a state of constant alert. Every morning I watched the guests leave my house. Every night I saw new ones arrive. The flow was constant, almost industrial. Audrey managed everything with military precision. She had a notebook where she wrote down schedules, names, payments. I saw it once when she left it on the kitchen counter while preparing coffee. Even from a distance, I could see columns of numbers, dates, codes. This wasn't an improvised business. It was a well-planned operation with records, a system, with months of preparation. Robert participated less visibly, but he was a full accomplice. He was the one who changed the sheets Audrey couldn't manage to wash. He bought the extra supplies they needed, soaps, toilet paper, towels. He kept the lawn impeccable to make a good impression on the guests, and every night when he thought no one saw him, he counted the cash with Audrey at the dining room table. I watched them through the window, illuminated by the hanging lamp my husband had installed 20 years ago. Their hands passed over $20, $50, $100 bills. They made piles. They put them in envelopes. They smiled with that greedy smile that turned my stomach. On Thursday night, I decided to do something risky. I needed more information. I needed to understand exactly what Audrey had said in that meeting with the man with the briefcase. So, I called Ellen, my lifelong lawyer friend. Ellen and I met 30 years ago in a sewing class. She was always brilliant. She studied law in her 40s. She specialized in family and property law. If anyone could help me understand the legal implications of what was happening, it was her. Elenina, what you're telling me is extremely serious. Ellen told me over the phone, her voice full of professional concern. If they are operating a lodging business, without permits, without paying taxes, without your consent as the property owner, they are committing multiple felonies, fraud, misuse of someone else's property, tax evasion. But what worries me more is what you mentioned about mental competency and nursing homes. Elenina, does your son have any power of attorney over you? Any signed document that gives him authority over your decisions? I thought carefully. No, I never signed anything like that. All my documents are in my safe deposit box at the bank. Ellen sighed with relief. That's good, very good, but listen to me carefully. If they are consulting with someone about declaring you mentally incompetent, it means they are looking for a legal way to take control of your assets. The process is complex and requires real medical evaluations, psychological tests, court appearances before a judge. They can't simply declare you incompetent just because. But if they have a corrupt doctor willing to falsify evaluations, if they have an unscrupulous lawyer who knows the legal loopholes, they could try it, and if they succeed, Elenina, they can commit you to a nursing home against your will and take your house legally. Terror seized me. What can I do, Ellen? She thought for a moment. First, you need solid evidence of everything they are doing, photos, videos, testimonies. Second, you need to protect your legal documents. Make sure they can't access anything. Third, as soon as you have enough evidence, we file a formal complaint. I'll take care of the entire legal process. But Elenina, you must be very careful. If they suspect you know anything, they could accelerate their plans. They could try something drastic. Her words chilled my blood. Something like what? Ellen paused for a second before answering. Like drugging you so you appear confused in front of a doctor. Like creating situations where you seem unstable. Like fabricating evidence that you can't take care of yourself. I've seen cases like this, Elenina, and they are more common than people think. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. Now I understood the magnitude of the danger. I wasn't just being stolen from. I was being prepared for a fate worse than death. Losing my autonomy, my home, my identity, being declared incompetent, being locked up in a nursing home while my son and daughter-in-law kept everything I had built, and all under the guise of legality, with documents signed by doctors and lawyers, with a judge who would never know the truth. Friday arrived, the day Moses had marked as special. From early on, I noticed a difference in the atmosphere. Audrey was more active than usual. She cleaned the entire house, changed sheets in all the rooms, bought fresh flowers, and put them in vases all over the living room. It was as if she were preparing for something important. Robert arrived home from work earlier than other days. By 6 o'clock in the evening, he was already home helping Audrey with the final preparations. At 7, the parade began. It wasn't one or two couples like the previous days. They were groups. The first to arrive were 4 people, 2 young couples who seemed to be on vacation. They wore cameras around their necks and were speaking English. Audrey received them with an impeccable professional smile. She showed them the rooms. She took the payment. 30 minutes later, another group arrived, 3 middle-aged women with large suitcases. Then an older couple, maybe in their 60s. Then 2 single men who seemed to be on a business trip. I counted mentally. There were 11 people. Inside my house, 11 strangers occupying every available corner. The living room had become a common area. I watched through the windows as the guests mingled, talked, some preparing food in my kitchen. Audrey and Robert acted like hotel hosts, smiling, offering extra towels, recommending tourist spots in New York City. My house had transformed into a completely functional hostel, and I, the legal owner, was hidden, watching from the neighbor's house like a refugee in my own neighborhood. I've never seen so many, Moses murmured. Next to me, this is different. It's like a special night. He was right. Friday was the busiest day, probably because tourists arrived to spend the weekend. Audrey and Robert took full advantage. I calculated quickly. If each person paid $30 per night, they were earning over $300 just tonight. In a full weekend, almost $1,000. And they did this every week. The hours passed slowly. I watched the guests eat, dinner, talk. Some went out to walk around the neighborhood, and returned. At 10 o'clock at night, the lights began to turn off gradually. The guests retired to their rooms. Audrey and Robert cleaned the kitchen and the living room. Then they too went to sleep. The house fell silent, but Moses had told me to wait until midnight, that at midnight I would discover everything. So I waited, every nerve in my body tense, my heart beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Moses' wall clock marked the passing of time with a constant, almost hypnotic tick-tock. 11:30分, 11:40分, 11:50分. Every minute felt like an eternity. Moses had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted after days of vigil with me, but I was completely awake, my eyes fixed on my house, waiting for that something Moses had seen before, that something that would reveal the whole truth. And then, when the clock struck 12 midnight, my breath stopped. The side door of my house, the one that leads to the backyard and that we almost never use, opened slowly. A figure came out. It was Audrey, but she wasn't alone. Behind her came out a man I didn't know, a tall man about 50 years old, dressed in dark clothing. He was carrying a briefcase in his hand, the same type of briefcase Moses had described when he saw Audrey at the coffee shop. My heart started racing. What was happening? Why was Audrey meeting this man at midnight? Why were they leaving through the back door like thieves? They walked toward the back of the yard where the old shed my husband used as a workshop is. Audrey took out a key, opened the padlock, and both entered the shed. The light turned on inside. Through the shed's small window, I could see shadows moving. They were talking. They were gesturing. Audrey took something out of her purse. Papers, maybe. The man checked them with a small flashlight. Then he took something out of his briefcase. More papers. A thick folder. Audrey took them, reviewed them page by page. She nodded her head. They seemed to be reaching some kind of agreement. The meeting lasted almost 20 minutes. Finally, the man put everything back in his briefcase. Audrey turned off the shed light. They came out, but instead of returning to the house, they walked toward the back fence. There's a small door there that leads to the back alley. Audrey opened it. The man left through there and disappeared into the darkness. Audrey closed the door, secured the padlock, and returned to the house through the side door. Everything had lasted less than half an hour. Silent, secret, invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically watching. I woke Moses up urgently. I saw him. I saw everything. Audrey met a man at midnight in the shed. Moses got up immediately, still half asleep, but alert. The man with the briefcase. He asked, yes, it has to be the same one. They reviewed papers, documents. They are planning something. Moses, something big. My neighbor rubbed his eyes and looked at his watch. It's late or early, depending on how you look at it. It's 0 hours 30 minutes. But now we know that there's someone else involved. Someone who works in the dark, in secret. This is worse than we thought. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed sitting by the window, watching my house, as if it were an enemy building. At dawn on Saturday, the guests began to leave. Some left early, others stayed to enjoy the full weekend. Audrey prepared breakfast for those who remained, acting like the perfect hostess. Coffee, toast, fruit, everything served with smiles and kindness. No one would have imagined that hours earlier she had been in a clandestine night meeting with a stranger. Robert left the house around 900 in the morning. I saw him get into his car and drive away. Audrey stayed along with the remaining guests. This was my opportunity. I needed to get into that shed. I needed to see if they had left anything, any clue about what they were planning. I told Moses my plan. He tried to dissuade me. It's too risky. Alalena, if Audrey sees you. But I was determined. I have the key to the back fence. I can enter through the alley without anyone seeing me. Audrey is busy with the guests in the front of the house. She won't see me. Moses finally agreed, but insisted on accompanying me to the alley to keep watch. We left his house through the back door. We walked through the silent alley. It was Saturday morning, and the neighborhood was quiet. Most people were still sleeping or eating breakfast in their homes. We reached the back door of my property. I took out my key with trembling hands. The padlock gave a soft click. I entered my own backyard like an intruder, my heart pounding against my ribs. The shed was about 20 yards from the door. I walked crouched low, hiding behind the bushes I myself had planted years ago. Every step seemed too loud, every breath too strong. Finally, I reached the shed. The door had a simple padlock, one I knew well. It was the same padlock my husband had used for years. I searched for the right key. My fingers clumsily tried 3 different keys before finding the correct one. The padlock opened. I entered the shed and closed the door behind me. Sunlight filtered through the small, dirty window, creating dusty rays in the air. The place smelled of old wood and moisture. Rusty tools hung from the walls, boxes stacked in the corners. Everything looked normal, intact. But then I saw something out of place. On my husband's old workbench, there was a metal box. It wasn't ours. I had never seen it before. It was gray, modern, with a digital lock. I approached slowly. The box was closed, but not locked. Just a simple latch that opened by pressing 2 side buttons. I tried it. Click. The box opened, and what I saw inside took my breath away. There were stacks of cash. American dollars in denominations of 20, 50, and 100. I counted quickly. There had to be at least $10,000 there, maybe more. All the money they had earned with their illegal business for months. But that wasn't the worst part. Beneath the money were documents. I took them out carefully and began to read them. The first was a rental agreement, a contract where my house appeared, registered as a property available for temporary rental and tourist lodging. The owner's name read Robert Vega, my son, but that was impossible. I was the legal owner. My name was on the deeds. How could he sign a contract as if he were the owner? I kept reading. There was a footnote in small print. Legal owner in process of transfer. Documentation pending judicial procedure. I felt the floor moving beneath my feet. Transfer. Judicial procedure. They weren't just using my house illegally. They were trying to steal it from me legally. The next document confirmed my worst fears. It was a psychological evaluation form, an official medical form with a private clinic's letterhead, and there in the patient section was my full name, Elenina Cristina Vega de Herrera. The evaluation date was scheduled for 2 weeks in the future. The reason for consultation read, evaluation of mental competency and autonomy for decision-making, family request due to concern about progressive cognitive decline. Progressive cognitive decline. They were painting me as a senile old woman, as someone who couldn't take care of herself, as someone who needed to be protected from her own decisions. And it was all a lie. I was perfectly fine. My mind was clear. My health was good for my 64 years. But they were going to fabricate a different story with this doctor, with this false evaluation, with this judicial process they were already preparing. There were more documents. One was a quote from a private nursing home, Golden Hope Residence, specialized care for older adults. The price was 3,000美元 monthly. There were yellow highlighter marks on the section that read, private rooms with 24-hour security, special program for patients with dementia and cognitive decline. They were looking for a prison for me, an expensive and legal prison, where they would lock me up while they enjoyed my house and my money. The last document was the most chilling. It was a broad power of attorney, a legal document that would give Robert total control over all my properties, bank accounts, and medical decisions. It was prepared, printed, ready to be signed. Only my signature was missing. And next to the document was a handwritten note in Audrey's handwriting. Dr. Lisandro confirms he can administer a mild sedative during the appointment. Signature will be obtained during a state of induced confusion. Witnesses already coordinated. Additional cost 5,000美元. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the papers. They were going to drug me. They were going to take me to a corrupt doctor, give me some medication that would confuse me, and make me sign that power of attorney without understanding what I was doing with paid witnesses who would say that I was in full control of my faculties, everything legal on paper, everything false in reality, and once they had that power of attorney, they could do whatever they wanted with me, sell my house, empty my accounts, lock me up in that nursing home, and I would have no way to defend myself because legally I would no longer have control over anything. I heard voices outside. I froze. It was Audrey talking to someone. One of the guests, probably. They were close. Too close. I quickly took out my phone and took pictures of all the documents, every page, every note, every detail. My hands trembled so much that some photos came out blurry, but I managed to capture the evidence. Then I put everything back in the box exactly as I had found it. I closed the box. I closed the shed and I ran, crouched low, back to the back door. Moses was waiting for me in the alley with an expression of anguish. I thought they had discovered you. You were in there almost 20 minutes. I couldn't speak. I only showed him my phone with the photos. He looked at the screen, swiped image after image, and his face grew paler and paler. My God, Elena, this is a complete criminal scheme. They aren't just stealing from you. They are systematically destroying you. I nodded, tears I could no longer hold back rolling down my cheeks. I need to call Ellen. I need to do something now. I can't wait any longer. We returned to Moses' house. With trembling hands, I dialed my lawyer friend's number. It was early Saturday, but Ellen answered on the third ring. Elena, what happened? I told her everything. The photos, the documents, the complete plan. Ellen remained silent for a long moment after I finished. Then she spoke with a professional controlled voice, but full of contained fury. Elenina, this is planned kidnapping, document fraud, conspiracy to commit several serious crimes. With the evidence you have, we can stop them, but you need to act fast. If that medical appointment is in 2 weeks, it means they are going to accelerate everything soon. What should I do? I asked. Ellen took a deep breath. First, don't return to that house yet. Stay where you are safe. Second, tomorrow, Sunday, I need you to come to my office. We will bring in a trusted notary. We will make legal documents to protect your assets immediately. Third, on Monday we will file a formal complaint with all this evidence. And fourth, she paused. Fourth, we are going to set a trap for them. A trap? I repeated Ellen's words, not fully understanding. My mind was still processing everything I had discovered in the shed. The false documents, the plan to drug me, the nursing home already quoted. Everything was too much, too dark, too calculated. Yes, Elenina, a trap, Ellen confirmed, firmly. They think you don't know anything. They think you are still traveling, trusting and naive. That is your advantage. You have evidence that they don't know you possess. Now, we are going to use it strategically to ensure they face full legal consequences. We don't just want to stop them, we want them to pay for every part of their criminal plan. On Sunday morning, Moses drove me in his car to Ellen's office in Los Angeles. She was waiting for me with another man, the notary she had mentioned. His name was Henry. He was about 50 years old, with a serious but kind face. Mrs. Vega, I am very sorry for what you are going through, he told me while shaking my hand, but I want you to know that we are going to protect your assets completely. When we finish today, your son will not be able to touch a single cent of your estate without facing immediate criminal charges. Over the next 3 hours, I signed documents, many documents. Ellen explained them one by one with patience. This is a revocable power of attorney. It cancels any power that might exist in Robert's name, existing or future. This other one is a declaration of full mental competency certified by a forensic psychologist who will come to evaluate you tomorrow. This is a new will that replaces any previous version and specifies that Robert is excluded as an heir due to fraudulent actions. And this last one is a preventative protection order that we will file with the judge on Monday. Each signature I put on those papers made me feel stronger, more in control. I was no longer the confused victim spying from the neighbor's window. Now I was a woman taking definitive legal action against those who tried to destroy me. And the trap? I asked when we finished with the documents. Ellen smiled. It wasn't a cheerful smile. It was the smile of a strategist preparing the final move in a game of chess. The trap requires your acting. Elenina, you need to go home. My heart leapt. Go home now. Ellen shook her head. Not today. Tomorrow night, you will return as if nothing had happened. As if you had really been traveling all week. You will arrive tired, happy to be home, without the slightest suspicion of what you have discovered. And for the next few days, you will act completely normal. Meanwhile, we will be working behind the scenes. Henry leaned forward and added, we will also contact the municipal authorities. A housing inspector will make a surprise visit to your house. If they find an illegal lodging operation, they can shut down the business immediately and apply severe fines. But there's more, Ellen continued. I've been investigating Dr. Lisandro, the doctor mentioned in those notes. He has a questionable history. He has already been investigated twice by the medical board for unethical practices. With your complaint and the photographic evidence, we can initiate a formal investigation against him, too. If they discover he was willing to drug patients to obtain fraudulent signatures, he will lose his medical license and face criminal charges. The magnitude of the plan began to take shape in my mind. It wasn't just about stopping Robert and Audrey. It was about dismantling the entire network they had built. The corrupt doctor, the false witnesses, the illegal lodging business, everything. How long will all this take? I asked. Ellen looked at Henry before answering. The inspector can go this week, probably Wednesday or Thursday. The investigation of the doctor will take longer, but with your formal complaint on Monday, the process will begin immediately. And as for Robert and Audrey, she made a dramatic pause. The final confrontation will be when they least expect it. 1. They believe everything is going according to their plan. I spent the rest of Sunday at Moses' house, mentally rehearsing how I would act when I returned. I had to be convincing. I couldn't show anger, suspicion, or fear. I had to be the trusting mother returning happily from visiting her sister, the naive mother-in-law who knows nothing about what is happening in her own house. It was ironic. They had been acting in front of me for months. Now it was my turn to act in front of them. On Monday night, with a suitcase in hand and my heart beating like a war drum, I walked toward my house. Moses had driven me to the corner, but I walked the rest of the way so it would look like I arrived by taxi. I rang the doorbell. I heard hurried footsteps inside. The door opened. Robert was there with a surprised expression. Mom, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I smiled with the warmth a mother reserves for her son. Although inside my heart was breaking, I decided to come back a day early. I missed my house. Audrey appeared behind Robert. Her smile was perfect, too perfect. Welcome back. How was the trip? I entered my house feeling like I was entering enemy territory. Everything looked normal, clean, tidy, no trace of the 11 guests who had occupied these spaces just 2 nights ago. Audrey had done an impeccable job erasing the evidence. The trip was wonderful. I lied with surprising ease. My sister spoiled me a lot, but you know, there's no place like your own home. They took my suitcase to my room. They prepared tea. They sat with me in the living room asking for details of the invented trip. I responded with stories I had prepared, adding convincing details about restaurants my sister and I supposedly visited, about walks we took, about conversations we had. Robert and Audrey listened, nodded, smiled, but I could see something behind their eyes. Relief that I had returned, without suspicion, relief that their secret remained intact. The house looks very nice, I commented, looking around. You took care of it perfectly, Audrey responded quickly, perhaps too quickly. Of course, we cleaned everything, watered the garden, everything as you asked. I took a sip of tea and added casually, it even smells different, like new cleaner. I saw a micro flash of panic in Audrey's eyes. Oh, yes, we did a deep cleaning. We wanted everything to be perfect for your return. There, she had cleaned to erase the traces of dozens of strangers who had occupied my home. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in a week, but I didn't really sleep. I stayed awake, listening. Around 11, I heard muffled voices coming from Robert and Audrey's room. They were talking in urgent whispers. I got up silently and walked barefoot to their door. It was slightly ajar. I pressed my ear against the crack. Do you think she suspects anything? Robert asked in a tense voice. No, she doesn't suspect anything, Audrey replied confidently. She's the same as always, gullible, trusting. The plan is still on. And Dr. Lisandro? Robert asked. Everything is already coordinated, Audrey confirmed. The appointment is next Friday. We'll give her the sedative. In her breakfast, we'll say we're taking her for a routine checkup. By the time she realizes what she signed, it will be too late. The power of attorney will be registered and we will have complete control. There was a silence. Then, Robert spoke in a voice I barely recognized as my son's. And after that, Audrey replied coldly, after that we commit her. We already have the place. Golden Hope Residence accepts patients with cognitive decline. We'll visit her once a month to keep up appearances. And in the meantime, this house will be completely ours. Completely ours. Those words pierced me like knives. I returned to my room in silence with silent tears rolling down my face. But they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of pure rage and steel determination. They had sealed their fate. I had just heard the complete confession, and even though I hadn't recorded it, I now knew every detail of their plan, including the exact date. Next Friday, I had less than a week to execute the perfect counter-trap. On Tuesday morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, prepared breakfast, and chatted with Robert and Audrey about trivialities. They were also acting. We were all actors in this macabre play where each one knew a different script, but I had an advantage. I knew they were acting. They didn't know I was doing it, too. As soon as Robert left for work and Audrey went out to the grocery store, I called Ellen from my room with the door closed. I told her word for word what I had heard the night before. Perfect, she said with satisfaction. Friday is the appointment with the corrupt doctor. That gives us time. The municipal inspector will visit your house on Thursday. It's better that it is before they try to drag you. Do you think they will receive guests this week? I thought for a moment. Probably Thursday and Friday night. They always have more movement on those days. Ellen paused thoughtfully. Then we will coordinate the inspector's visit for Thursday night when the house is full of living evidence. Over the next 2 days, I maintained my perfect performance. I acted like the sweet, trusting grandmother. I asked Audrey if she needed help with anything. I offered Robert his favorite cookies that I baked specially. They seemed relaxed, convinced that their plan remained intact. On Wednesday night, Audrey even showed me a brochure. I found this health center that offers preventive checkups for people your age. Mom, how about I take you on Friday? It's free for seniors. Free? Liar. They were going to pay $5,000 for that checkup. I feigned genuine interest. A checkup? Well, that wouldn't be bad. I haven't been to the doctor in a while. Audrey smiled with relief. Excellent. I've already made the appointment for 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday. I'll go with you. I nodded sweetly while inside. My blood was boiling. She was closing the trap without knowing that I had already closed a bigger trap around her. On Thursday afternoon, while Audrey and Robert were preparing the house for the night's guests, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Ellen. Inspector confirmed for 9 o'clock at night. Police will be on standby nearby. Stay in your room when he arrives. We'll take care of everything. My heart started beating faster. Tonight, their world would begin to crumble. As expected, the guests began to arrive around 7 o'clock that night. First, a young couple with large backpacks. Then, 3 women who seemed to be on a girls' trip. Then a lone businessman with a briefcase and small suitcase. By 8:30, there were 7 strangers also occupying my house. Audrey played her role as the expert hostess. Robert helped with the bags. He showed them the rooms. He smiled professionally. I was in my room supposedly reading, but in reality, I was waiting, watching the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. 8:40, 8:50, 5 minutes to 9, and then I heard the sound I had been waiting for. The doorbell, firm, authoritative. It wasn't the doorbell of an expected guest. It was the doorbell of someone with authority. I heard hurried footsteps, Robert's voice asking who it was from inside, and then a strong male voice from outside. Municipal inspector, open the door, please. Silence, a heavy, dense silence, then the sound of the door opening slowly. Inspector, is there a problem? Robert asked in a voice that tried to sound calm, but failed. We received an anonymous complaint about an illegal lodging operation at this address. I need to inspect the property. There must be a mistake. I heard Audrey's voice, more high-pitched than normal. This is a private residence. We don't operate any business. The inspector replied with a professional but inflexible tone. Then you won't mind if I verify. I have an inspection order signed by the municipal judge. If you don't voluntarily let me in, I will return with the police and a search warrant. There was another silence. Then Robert yielded. Of course, Inspector, come in. I peeked, just a crack out of my door. I could see part of the living room. The inspector was a man in his 40s, dressed in an official municipal shirt, clipboard in hand. Behind him was another younger man, probably his assistant, with a camera. They began to walk through the house. The inspector asked questions. How many people reside here permanently? Robert answered with a trembling voice. 3. My mother, my wife, and me. The inspector looked around the living room. There were the 7 guests, some sitting on the sofa, others standing, all with confused expressions. And these people are Audrey tried to improvise. They are friends visiting. The inspector walked toward one of the guests, a man in his 30s. Are you a friend of the family? The man, honest or perhaps nervous, replied. No, sir, I reserved a room online. I paid 35 美元 a night. Robert's face went pale. Audrey tried to intervene. He's confused. Inspector, I don't know what he's talking about. But the inspector was already walking toward the bedrooms. He opened the door to what had been my master bedroom. Inside were the 3 women with their suitcases open, clothes on the bed, toiletries in the private bathroom. And these ladies are friends, too. Audrey's silence was answer enough. The inspector took out a measuring device from his briefcase. He began to count the occupied rooms, taking photos of each one. His assistant documented everything with the camera. Room 1 occupied by 2 non-residents. Room 2 occupied by 3 non-residents. Room 3 occupied by 1 non-resident. Shared bathrooms showing multiple use. Kitchen with utensils for more than 3 people. Extra towels piled in the hallway. Every sentence was another nail in the coffin of their illegal business. Robert attempted one last defense. Inspector, this is a misunderstanding. Perhaps we occasionally help acquaintances who need lodging, but it's not a business. The inspector interrupted him. Do you charge money for that lodging? Robert hesitated. Well, sometimes we receive a voluntary contribution for expenses. The inspector shook his head. That's called a business, a lodging business. And to operate a lodging business, you need a commercial license, a tourist operating permit, a fire safety certificate, a sanitation certificate, and payment of corresponding taxes. Do you have any of those documents? The silence was absolute. Audrey and Robert looked at each other, defeated. They knew they had nothing. The inspector continued. According to the municipal code, operating a commercial lodging business without permits constitutes a serious violation. The fine is $10,000. Furthermore, I must inform you that the tax authorities will be notified about undeclared income, and since this property is registered in the name of, he looked at his papers, Elenina Cristina Vega de Herrera, who according to records has not authorized any commercial activity. This could also constitute fraudulent use of someone else's property. I felt it was the moment. I opened my bedroom door and stepped out. All eyes turned toward me, the guests confused, the inspector with a professional expression, and Robert and Audrey with faces of pure terror. Good evening, I said with a calm voice. I am Elenina Vega, the owner of this property. The inspector nodded respectfully. Mrs. Vega, did you authorize the operation of a lodging business on your property? I took a moment, looking directly into the eyes of my son and daughter-in-law. No, Inspector, I authorized nothing. In fact, I just discovered this situation a few days ago. Audrey took a step toward me. Mom, I can explain. I raised my hand, stopping her. I don't want explanations. Audrey, not now. I turned to the inspector. What happens now? He closed his clipboard. The current guests will have to vacate the property immediately. We will give them 30 minutes to gather their belongings. Your son and daughter-in-law will receive the official fine notification and will have to appear before the municipal judge next week. I have also notified the police. There are 2 officers outside in case additional assistance is needed for the eviction. The next 30 minutes were chaotic. The guests collected their things hastily, some demanding refunds from Audrey. She had kept the cash in her purse and had to return it under the watchful eye of the inspector. Robert remained paralyzed, unable to speak, watching as his illegal business crumbled in minutes. When the last guest left, the inspector handed me a copy of the official report. Mrs. Vega, I recommend you consult with a lawyer. You have the right to sue for damages. I already have a lawyer. Inspector, thank you for your work tonight. When the inspector and his assistant left, the house fell into a deathly silence. The 3 of us remained in the living room. I was standing by the window. Robert was sitting on the sofa with his head in his hands. Audrey was standing near the door, arms crossed with the expression of a cornered animal. It was she who spoke first. Her voice was no longer sweet or calculating. It was desperate. Mom, I know this looks bad, but we had our reasons. The house expenses are high. We have debts. I turned to her slowly. Reasons, debts, and that was sufficient justification to turn my home into an illegal business without my consent. Audrey took a step toward me. We were going to tell you eventually. We just wanted to save up first, to have some money before what? I interrupted with a cutting voice. Before drugging me and making me sign a fraudulent power of attorney. The silence that followed was deafening. Audrey turned pale. Robert raised his head abruptly, his eyes full of shock. How? Robert started to say, but his voice broke. How do I know? I completed the question for him, because I was never traveling. Robert, I was here watching, discovering every detail of your well and calculated plan. I walked to the center of the living room, looking at both of them with an intensity that made them step back. I know about the illegal lodging business. I know about the cash hidden in the shed. I know about Dr. Lisandro. I know about the Friday appointment where you planned to sedate me. I know about the power of attorney you wanted to make me sign. And I know about the Golden Hope Residence nursing home where you planned to lock me up. Audrey shook her head frantically. No, it's not what you think. Yes, we talked to the doctor, but it was just for precaution, because we were worried about your health. Stop the lies, I shouted, and my voice resonated in the walls of my own house. I found the documents, Audrey. I saw them with my own eyes. I read the notes written in your handwriting. Mild sedative during the appointment. Signature will be obtained during a state of induced confusion. Those were your exact words. Audrey's face lost all color. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. I turned to my son. And you, Robert, you, whom I raised, whom I loved, to whom I gave everything your father and I could give. How could you? Robert had tears rolling down his face. Mom, the economic situation was desperate. We had 3万美元 of debt. The bank was going to foreclose on our old apartment. Audrey said, if we could get money fast, and your solution was to betray me. I interrupted him. Your solution was to steal my house, my freedom, my dignity. It wasn't stealing. Audrey exploded in a high-pitched voice. This house is enormous. You live here alone. We were just taking advantage of the available space. And as for the power of attorney, it was to protect you. You're aging. You need someone to make decisions for you. I am 64 years old, I said with an icy voice. Not 80, not 90, 64. My mind is perfectly clear. My health is good. I don't need anyone to make decisions for me. What you were planning was not protection. It was legal kidnapping. Robert stood up, staggering. Mom, please, we can fix this. We'll give all the money back. We'll leave the house if you want, but please don't report us. If you go to the police, we could go to jail. I looked him in the eyes, those eyes that once looked at me with a child's pure love, and I felt my heart breaking into pieces. And what did you want me to do, Robert? That I let you drug me? That I let you lock me up in a nursing home while you enjoyed my property? That I feigned dementia to make your life easier? It wasn't going to go that far, Robert murmured. Audrey was just exploring options, but I never would have. I heard your conversation last night. I interrupted him again. I heard you planning exactly that. I heard you say you would visit me once a month to keep up appearances. I heard you turn me into a formality, into an obstacle that had to be managed. Robert collapsed back onto the sofa, sobbing. Audrey remained petrified, her mask of the perfect daughter-in-law finally completely destroyed. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. Tomorrow is Friday. You had planned to take me to Dr. Lisandro at 10 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, that is not going to happen. What is going to happen is this. You are going to pack your things and you are going to leave my house. You have until tomorrow at noon. Audrey reacted immediately. Evict us. Where are we going to go? You should have thought about that before you betrayed me. I replied without emotion. You have family. You have friends. Figure it out. Mom, please. Robert pleaded. We can't live like this. We don't have money for a rental deposit. We have nothing. You have $10,000 in the box in the shed. I pointed out the money you earned illegally with my property. You can use it for your deposit, although you will probably need to save it to pay the municipal fine and lawyer's fees. Audrey turned to me with blazing eyes. There were no longer pleas in her voice, only venom. You know what? Fine, we will leave your precious house. But don't think this ends here. We will get a lawyer. We will fight the fine and we will sue for wrongful eviction. I smiled without humor. Go ahead, Audrey, get a lawyer. But I warn you that my lawyer is very good, and she has photographic evidence of every fraudulent document, every criminal plan, every detail of your illegal operation. She has photos of the hidden cash, the false contracts, the notes, about drugging me. Do you really want to go to court with that? Audrey's face fell apart. She finally understood that she was completely defeated, that I had played the game better, that while they were planning to destroy me, I was 2 steps ahead. There is something else you need to know, I continued. My lawyer has already filed documents revoking any power of attorney that might exist in my name. She filed a declaration of full mental competency certified by a forensic psychologist, and she filed a new will where Robert is specifically excluded as an heir due to his fraudulent actions. Robert raised his head abruptly. You disinherited me. His voice was a mixture of shock and pain. What did you expect? I replied with a tired voice, that I would reward you for trying to destroy me. The rest of the night was tense and silent. Robert and Audrey locked themselves in their room. I sat in the living room, exhausted, but relieved. Around midnight, I heard sounds of suitcases being dragged. They were packing. Reality had finally penetrated their heads. The next morning, Friday, I woke up early. I made coffee just for myself. I sat by the window, watching the sunrise over the garden that my husband and I had cultivated together. At 9 in the morning, Robert and Audrey came down with 4 large suitcases. They didn't look at me. They loaded everything into their car in silence. Robert returned one last time. He left the house keys on the entrance table. For a moment, I thought he would say something, maybe an apology, maybe a final plea, but he only looked at me with empty eyes and left. I heard his car engine start. I heard the tires on the pavement driving away, and then silence. My house was empty. I was alone. I remained seated in the living room for a long time after they left. The house felt different, bigger, quieter, but also more mine than ever. I walked through every room slowly, reclaiming every space that had been violated by strangers. I opened the windows to let in fresh air. I stripped the sheets from all the beds that had been used by the guests. I would take them to be washed, but I honestly considered burning them. Some memories don't deserve to be preserved. Around noon, Moses knocked on my door. He brought a hot turkey chili he had prepared. I thought you might not be up for cooking today, he said with that kindness that only true friends possess. We sat down to eat together in my kitchen. I told him everything that had happened the night before, the inspector's arrival, the confrontation, the expulsion of Robert and Audrey. Moses listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he placed his wrinkled hand on mine. You did the right thing, Elenina, the painful thing, but the right thing. Why does it feel so awful? Then, I asked with a broken voice. Because it was your son, Moses replied with the wisdom of his 72 years. Because a mother's love doesn't simply go out just because the son betrays. It hurts, precisely because you loved. If you didn't love, it wouldn't hurt. He was right. That night, I cried. I cried for the son I thought I had and who maybe never really existed. I cried for the family I thought I had built. I cried for the betrayal, for the greed that had corrupted my own blood. But I also cried out of relief because I had survived, because I had won, because I was still the owner of my life, my mind, and my home. The following Monday, Ellen called me with news. Elenina, the complaint against Dr. Lisandro has been accepted. The medical board initiated a formal investigation. I also contacted the district attorney. With all the evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, they are considering filing criminal charges against Audrey and Robert. I felt a knot in my stomach. Criminal charges, jail. Ellen paused. It's possible, planned fraud, conspiracy to deprive an elder of their freedom, falsification of documents. The charges are serious, but Elenina, you have the final say. If you don't want to proceed with the criminal case, we can limit ourselves to the civil one. I thought for a long time. Part of me wanted them to pay completely for what they tried to do to me, but another part that part that was still a mother, couldn't bear the thought of my son in jail. Ellen, proceed with everything related to Dr. Lisandro. That man deserves to lose his license. But with Robert and Audrey, give me time to think. Ellen, understood. You have a month before the window to file criminal charges closes. Think about it carefully. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. It was from Robert. The envelope was crumpled as if it had been written and rewritten several times. With trembling hands, I opened it. The handwriting was my son's, but the words were those of a broken man. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. I have no excuses. Greed blinded me. Audrey convinced me it was the only solution to our problems, but I was weak. I allowed it to happen. I participated. And now I live every day with the burden of knowing that I betrayed the person who loved me most in this world. The letter continued. We broke up, Audrey and I. I couldn't stay with someone capable of planning something so well. I moved alone into a small apartment. I lost my job when the scandal became public. I'm working construction now, paying off the debts little by little. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, that if I could go back in time, I would change everything, that the memory of what I did to you haunts me every night. The letter ended simply. I loved you. I love you, and I regret having lost you, your son who no longer deserves to be called that. Robert, I cried as I read those words. Part of me wanted to tear up the letter and forget, but another part, that maternal part Moses had mentioned, felt my son's pain. It didn't justify his actions. It would never justify them, but it was real pain, real repentance, or at least I wanted to believe it was. I put the letter in a drawer. I wasn't ready to answer. Maybe I never would be, but I couldn't throw it away either. A month later, I had to make the decision about the criminal charges. I sat down with Ellen in her office. If I proceed with the charges, what would happen? I asked. She was honest with me. Probably 2 to 5 years in jail for both of them. Audrey more time because she was the main architect of the plan. Robert perhaps less if he cooperates. They would have permanent criminal records, difficulty finding work in the future. Basically, their lives would be marked forever. I took a deep breath, and if I don't proceed, Ellen leaned forward. The municipal fine is still standing. They will have to pay it. Dr. Lisandro will lose his license regardless of what you decide about Robert and Audrey, and civilly, they are already legally prevented from coming near you or your property. I closed my eyes. I thought about my husband, what he would have wanted. I thought about the boy Robert once was before greed corrupted him. I thought about the kind of person I wanted to be at the end of my life. I will not file criminal charges, I said finally. Ellen nodded without judgment. Are you sure? No, I admit it, but it is what I can live with. They will have to live with what they did. That is enough of a prison. Ellen smiled faintly. You are more generous than they deserve, Elena. 6 months have passed since that night when the inspector knocked on my door. The house is truly mine again. Now, I hired a professional cleaning company that eliminated all traces of the guests. I painted the walls new colors. I donated the furniture that had been used by strangers and bought new pieces. I converted my old master bedroom into an art studio. I always wanted to paint and now I have the time and peace to do it. Moses is still my neighbor and my best friend. We eat dinner together twice a week. He helped me install a security system in the house, not because I am afraid, but because I now value my privacy more than ever. Ellen became more than my lawyer. She is my confidant, my legal protector, my friend. I made sure to update my will, leaving something to her for everything she did. And Robert, I haven't heard from him directly since that letter, but through mutual acquaintances, I know he is still working in construction, that he is slowly paying his debts, that he lives alone. There are days when I think about answering his letter. There are days when I think about calling him, but then I remember the box in the shed, the documents about drugging me, the conversations about locking me in a nursing home, and the wound bleeds again. Maybe someday I can forgive, not forget. I will never be able to forget. but maybe forgive. My therapist says that forgiveness is not for the person who hurt you. It is for yourself, to free yourself from the weight of hatred. I'm working on that slowly, painfully, but working. One afternoon, while painting in my new studio, Moses came to visit me. He stood looking at my work in progress, a garden, full of flowers of all colors except cold tones. It's beautiful, he commented. Thank you, I replied. It's my way of healing. Each brush stroke is a piece of my life that I reclaim. He smiled. You know what? You survived something that would have destroyed many people. You are stronger than you think. Elenina. That night, as I prepared for sleep in my quiet but safe house, I thought about everything that had happened. The fake trip, the night spying from Moses' window, the shed and its secrets, the midnight when my breath stopped at seeing the complete truth, the confrontation, the victory, the pain, the loneliness that came after. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 64-year-old woman with more wrinkles than before, with sadder but also wiser eyes. I saw a survivor. I saw someone who had been betrayed by the one she loved most, and yet was still standing. I realized that night that love can be the perfect disguise for a trap. I whispered to my reflection, but I also learned that self-love is the strongest shield against any betrayal. I turned off the light and lay down in my bed in my house under my roof, alone. Yes, hurt, of course, but free, owner of my destiny, and that after everything I had lived through was